Folks, you cannot win a tariff war against Trump. He may look like a buffoon, walk like a buffoon, but he's not a buffoon when it comes to his economic policy. It is a mistake to think that he doesn't have a plan. He does have a plan. We don't have a plan.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my...
Hello and welcome to The Nexus. Our special guest today is Yanis Varoufakis. You'll remember he was Greece's finance minister during a terrible economic crisis. Often seen riding his motorbike through Athens, some called him the rock star finance minister, resisting the faceless bureaucrats of the European Union and the IMF, not to mention the rapacious bankers. Well, he's here with us today to discuss Trump's tariffs, which he says are somewhat misunderstood. Then we'll be talking to him about free speech in the United Kingdom. Whatever happened to it? And finally, transhumanism. It sounds dystopian, but it is quite possibly the future of mankind. So, Yanis, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Trump and his reciprocal tariffs. Here's how he announced them on America's so-called Liberation Day.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them.
Yanis, you've taught economics for years. Could you just start with the very basics? How do you define a tariff?
A tariff is a tax you pay on anything you purchase which has been imported in your country. So essentially, you as a consumer are paying it. But of course, that impacts the seller, the foreign seller, who is importing that commodity into your own country. Now, who is going to shoulder the greatest share of the burden? You or the importer? Depends on how desperate you are to buy that particular good and how desperate he or she is to sell it. In economic terms, the relative elasticity of demand, but forget economics. So if you are buying something that you can't live without, like, gas for your car or insulin, if you are suffering from diabetes, then you bear, as a consumer, most of the burden. But if you're buying something that you could easily substitute with something else which is produced locally and is not subject to the tariff, then it is the exporter that has to shoulder the bulk of the pain.
So many countries already have tariffs on America, and Trump says he's just trying to match their tariffs. That's why he calls them reciprocal tariffs. Should we take that at face value? Is that not reasonable?
It is reasonable. It would have been reasonable if it were true. This is part of the showmanship of Donald Trump. Trump, like most American presidents, combine a second-rate version of Hollywood with some hard-nosed economics at the background. So let us not focus too much on the third-rate Hollywood. And let's focus far more on what is really at stake. And what is at stake is not the tariffs. He's using the tariffs as a weapon by which to extract concessions from Europe and from Asia, primarily. Concessions on another front. And that other front is the value of the dollar. Allow me to go straight to the essence of it. He wants to devalue the dollar, but he doesn't want you and me to turn from the dollar as a reserve currency, as the currency of the global trading system, to another currency. So he wants his cake and he wants to eat it. He wants to devalue the dollar and he wants us not to buy €1 or euros with it. This is the delicate strategy that his team is trying to execute. Whether it will succeed or not is another matter.
So does that mean that he will go easy on the tariffs in real life? Or does that mean he will continue to pursue them until other currencies are allowed to appreciate against the dollar?
It's no question of being allowed. Look, the Japanese have $1,200 billion stashed away. The Europeans have about $1,000 billion stashed away. The Chinese have $4.5 billion stashed away. Because this is what happens when the United States, since the early 1970s, is in permanent deficit with the rest of the world. The rest of the world produces exports. The Americans consume them. The foreign capitalists receive dollars, and they hoard a lot of it, and much of it goes back to New York, and they buy American debt, they buy real estate in Miami and Manhattan and so on. This is how the world has been functioning since the 1970s. And what Trump now says is that you will need, this is what he said, telling us, the foreigners, not you and me maybe, because we don't have those billions of dollars in our accounts, but to those who do have them, you're going to have to get rid of many of your dollars, sell them, buy things that I will tell you what to buy, and I'll come back to that if you want.
Right.
But you shouldn't buy the Chinese currency, you shouldn't buy the European currency, because I do not want anybody to usurp the dominant, the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar. So he's putting these tariffs out there, blanket attack on everyone with these tariffs, which he calls reciprocal. They're nothing of the sort. We know the formula that he used in order to calculate them. There is not much utility to be had from studying it.
Yanis, can we take
each one of us and say, I want this from you.
You mentioned the formula, Yanis. Can we take a very close and nerdy look at that? And a lot of viewers will turn off at this point, but let's get into it quite a bit, okay? So from looking at how he's worked out his reciprocal tariffs, it appears that they've come up with these tariffs by dividing the trade deficit with each country by the amount they import from each country. So in the case of Vietnam, for example, $123.5 billion divided by $136.6 billion, which equals 0.9 or 90%. So they conclude, the Americans, that Vietnam is hitting America with 90% tariffs. Are you saying that's not a fair formula?
Well, look, they're not even concluding that. They say that they're concluding that. What they're saying is this. If you are running a trade surplus in relation to the United States, we're going to take this trade surplus as our guide into how much we're going to hit you over the head with a blunt tariff. This is what they're saying. And once they do this to everyone, then they will go to Vietnam, they will go to the European Union, they will go to Britain, and they will go to Turkey, they will go to Indonesia and say, okay, now, all right, if you want us to slash this tariff, this is what we want from you. And they will demand different things from different people. So from the Japanese, who have, as I said, $1.2 trillion stashed away, they will demand that most of that money is being spent on purchasing long-term American debt or crypto for that matter, especially stable coins that are linked to the US dollar. So the dollars got sold, the dollar value comes down, American exports become more competitive, and at the same time, the dollars that were stashed away by the Japanese will be used in order to buy things that are connected to the dollar system. This is what they will do with Japan. With the Germans, they will do something completely different. To the German government, what Navarro and the rest and Bessent are going to say is, don't you dare stop BASF, Siemens, and BMW and Volkswagen from relocating their factories to the United States. German industry is already doing it. They are in the process of relocating to the United States. They had been even before Trump was reelected. But, this will be the quid pro quo. You let your capital flee from Germany to New Mexico, to Texas, to wherever, and we will consider reducing the tariffs. So that is the plan.
So, Yanis, whether or not we should take him at his word, the end result he's looking for is to make the United States better off and richer. And given that he is the president of the United States, is he not doing the right thing by his country then?
Well, you see, there's no such thing as the country interest. The national interest is a figment of our imagination. What really surprises me is that people are surprised that Trump is doing this. Firstly, he has been saying it for years now.
Yes.
And now he's just doing it. Secondly, it is not unprecedented, Matthew. Richard Nixon did that and worse to the Europeans and to the Japanese on the 15th of August, 1971. The Nixon shock was much, much worse. And what was the effect of the Nixon shock? Did the Nixon shock work? It worked. He managed to succeed in something that was unprecedented, to turn a deficit country, because America was going in the 1960s, late 60s, from being a surplus country to being a deficit country. And yet he managed the deficit to balloon, to burgeon, and along with the deficit, US hegemony to balloon. This has never happened before. Every other country, the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, the Spanish Empire, that went from having a surplus to having a deficit, effectively collapsed. The United States over the last 50 years has been going from strength to strength as a result of getting deeper and deeper into the red, both in terms of its government budget deficit and its trade deficit. And that was a success. Now, was that good for the Americans? No, for the vast majority of Americans, it was catastrophic. Or, if you compare hourly wages in real terms with 1973 values, you see that today they are lower than they were in 1973. So the working class in the United States suffered immensely. So when we ask ourselves the question, is this going to make America stronger? Well, it will make the American ruling class stronger if he succeeds. There's no guarantee he will succeed. Will the working class become strong? Well, that depends. If he manages to bring home some of the jobs that Siemens and various Japanese companies will carry with them as they try to avoid the tariffs by relocating to the United States, those workers who will get jobs will be better off. But other workers who will remain as part of the American precariat, working for peanuts for Amazon in warehouses, and for whom this increase in the manufacturer base, if it happens, is not going to be sufficient to shift them from being members of the precariat and putting them back in the bosom of the proletariat, they will not benefit.
So, Yanis, you mentioned the working class there. Some may not. I know that the United Auto Workers Union is very excited about it. They're glad that Trump has put tariffs on cars and trucks entering the US market. They say, we applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that has devastated working class communities for decades.
And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%.
They go on to say, with these tariffs, thousands of good-paying blue-collar auto jobs could be brought back to working-class communities across the United States. Do you think that's likely, Yanis?
Some will. Already, there is an exodus of capital from Europe and to some extent from Japan to the United States. Even the Taiwanese are shifting some of the production of microchips to the United States. So some jobs will be created. The question is, are they going to be enough? And Matthew, allow me to say that, we are all mesmerized by the sound and fury of his tariffs. But remember, Trump is coming to the battlefield with a shotgun that has 2 barrels. He's fired one of the 2 barrels, the tariffs. The second barrel contains aggressive tax cuts for the fat cats of the United States. If he fires that, then the auto workers are going to be far less enthused because those are going to enhance, firstly, the wealth of the wealthy at the expense, again, of the working class, and secondly, their bargaining power. So are the auto workers union absolutely certain that it will be the working class that benefits from the transfer of profits from, German automaking industries to American automaking industries? That is not at all clear.
Just very briefly, why do you think that he's going to give tax cuts to the ultra-wealthy but not to the middle classes?
Because that's what he does. Just observe what he did under Trump 1.0 during his first term in office. And anyway, if you give a substantial tax cut to corporations, which is what he's planning to do, it's not going to be the middle class who benefit from that. It will be the Magnificent Seven. It will be all those tech lords who are now suffering losses in their shares. But between you and I very much suspect that when this second barrel is fired, you are going to have another bout of exuberance in the stock exchanges, and these people are going to be very, very satisfied. Yeah. And the workers are going to, once more, be left to, cuddle their broken dreams and hopes.
Although he did say that if the Department of Governmental Efficiency works out very well and he's able to cut the budget deficit, then he will perhaps give a $5,000 check to all tax-paying Americans.
Well, what can a $5,000 check do for you if you can't put food on the table consistently If you go bankrupt the moment your child gets sick, if the slide in the quality of your work continues, it's simply an excuse for giving gigantic amounts of money to the fat cats.
The Trump administration says over 50 countries and blocs are negotiating with the United States, including Vietnam and others. Last night, at the time of recording, he had this to say. It's a little bit crude, but let's have a listen.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my They are dying to make a deal. Please, please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir. And then I'll see some rebel Republican, some guy that wants to grandstand, say, I think that Congress should take over negotiations. Let me tell you, you don't negotiate like I negotiate. Congress takes over negotiating, sell America fast because you're going to go busted. You don't. I just saw it today. A couple of your congressmen said, I think we should get involved in the negotiation of the tariffs. Oh, that's what I need. I need some guy telling me how to negotiate. Ay, ay, ay.
So, Yanis, the United States says that Vietnam and also the European Union and others have agreed to bring tariffs down to zero if they're able to make a good agreement with the United States. They're now projecting this, as we just heard, as them winning this trade war through tariffs. Do you think they are winning?
It's totally unclear at the moment. It is not impossible. There is no doubt that politicians from all parts of the world are rushing to Mar-a-Lago or to the White House to cut a deal, except the Chinese, because the Chinese can afford this tariff war. The Chinese are looking at this tariff war as a great opportunity to rebalance their own economy. Unlike the Europeans, they have a very substantial big tech of their own. They have green tech, which is the best in the world. They have old tech, which is very competitive. And they also have a seamlessly connected digital sector with the financial sector. And I think that Trump knows that. He was never banking on the Chinese running after him and sucking up, as he put it.
Of course, the Chinese still have a $300 billion a year trade surplus with the United States. So it would be reasonable to think that the United States would win this.
It will win. There's no doubt that the United States is going to win the tariff war. That is, it will not buckle under Chinese pressure because, as I said, if you are having a surplus, you cannot win a tariff war. But the Chinese authorities are very clear-headed on this, unlike the European ones. They see this as a fantastic opportunity to increase aggregate demand domestically so that they don't need to have a $300 billion trade surplus with the United States. This was always the objective of the Chinese government, to reduce its dependency on net exports to the United States. And they can do it because they have all those sectors. Europe doesn't have any of those sectors. We have fallen behind technologically, industrially, and therefore they have become supplicants to Donald Trump. You can see that the original bravado by Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, has disappeared, and now they are running around like headless chickens trying to find out what to do without their heads on. They are not discussing the rebalancing of the European economy, which is what they should be discussing. But is this going to be a victory for Trump? Well, that depends to a very large extent on, firstly, the extent to which foreign capital floods into the United States to build new factories. We'll have to wait and see. And also on financial markets.
That's a great point. Yanis, you'd have noticed the mainstream media is focusing a lot on the financial markets coming down, the stock markets. For example, the S&P, at the time of recording, is down about 15% since Trump took office. That's the worst performance for a new administration since the dot-com bubble burst under George W. Bush. Is this important?
You know what? On this, I think that if I were him, I would not be sweating over equities, over the stock exchange, because the stock exchange is so fickle. Remember, it came down 15% from exorbitant heights which some of us were describing as unsustainable anyway. But what really matters, what I would be sweating over if I were him, is the bond market. The bond market, which has been behaving in ways that are not consistent with what is happening. But of course, there is an explanation for that. The yields of the American debt are going up. In other words, there seems to be a sell-off of American bonds, which shouldn't be the case, because when there is a crisis, whatever crisis, even if it is the fault of the United States, it happened in 2008, and a major crisis was caused by the United States, and yet people were buying American debt because it's the safe haven. That is not happening at the moment. And the reason for that is that there are so many inane money traders out there who, for the last year or two, have been borrowing ridiculous amounts of money to gamble in the stock exchanges of the world and the derivatives markets using American debt, U.S. treasuries as collateral. And now, because they have margin calls to pay, they are selling off those. So that is an area where I think there's a serious vulnerability on the part of Trump.
Just a final question on this particular aspect of the story. If Trump didn't try to address the soaring debt, both the debt that they spend every year and the trade deficit and the amount that they have to pay to service the debt, if he didn't do something about that, would America eventually get to the point where it would essentially become bankrupt?
America cannot become bankrupt as long as it has the dollar, and the dollar maintains its dominance. It is pie in the sky for any of the enemies of the United States to imagine that America would go bankrupt. It won't.
But if the dollar becomes less valuable over time, could another currency not emerge?
Well, the only other currency that could emerge is the Chinese currency.
Yeah.
But China doesn't want that. China is utterly reluctant to internationalize the yuan. They don't want to do it. They are very conservative, and I think that the United States can bank on that conservatism of the Chinese. Look, in the 1970s, think of the Nixon shock. It's important to compare the Trump shock with the Nixon shock. What did Nixon want to do? To devalue the dollar in order to make it even more hegemonic as the reserve currency of the world. He succeeded in doing it. So there is a precedent. Whether Trump will succeed in repeating that success by Nixon, that's for us to observe and even to act, because I'm still in politics. For instance, it will depend on whether the European Union finds the nous, finds the wisdom, instead of talking to the Chinese about tariffs, to coordinate with the Chinese, to have a stimulus program, because there is a serious fear of recession both in Russia, in China, and in Europe. So if they could coordinate with the Chinese on that, if they could cooperate financially, if they could create swap lines between them, then Trump would find it very difficult to beat together the European Union and China. But I don't think that the European Union has the wisdom that is necessary in order to see this opportunity to strike a deal with China.
Yanis, we're nearly out of time. I can squeeze in one more question about free speech. Now, the United States has hinted that its trade relationship with the United Kingdom and other European countries is somewhat conditional on those countries upholding certain freedoms. Have a listen to J.D. Vance in Munich.
A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Yanis, are you concerned about that example and about freedom of speech in the United Kingdom more broadly?
I'm utterly worried about freedom of speech, which is under fire in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in the United States. Think of the pro-Palestinian supporters. I was personally banned from entering Germany, even by Zoom, for not supporting the genocide of Palestinians in Israel-Palestine. But I'm also absolutely appalled by the hypocrisy of all these politicians, of the left and of the right, of Keir Starmer, of J.D. Vance himself. Did he ever say a single word in support of the right of Julian Assange to do journalism without spending years in solitary confinement in Britain's Guantanamo, which is the Belmarsh prison? What about the people who are being arrested today for, the Quakers in Britain, 6 women who were brought in, the doors broken down, and they were abducted by police, for having a Quakers meeting, for goodness sake. So yes, I'm absolutely appalled. And this is why on Friday, around 2 o'clock, I will be at the Foreign Press Association in London at a press conference where we're going to be making the point that journalism, that freedom of the press is under fire, and we better do something about it before we wake up one morning and fascism is not at our door, but it's within.
Another threat on the horizon, Yanis, transhumanism. You've been warning about it as it's being pushed by the Silicon Valley types for some time. Let's have a quick listen to them first, and then we'll ask you what you make of it.
Imagine you could communicate clearly at 10 or 100 or 1,000 times faster than normal.
For myself, the transhuman, when I wrote the manifesto in 1983, it was about overcoming human limitations, biological limitations.
I do agree that, extending health span and augmenting humans is a very good thing to do.
Yanis, when you listen to them, you think, oh, that sounds really great. But perhaps you could explain what transhumanism is and why you are concerned about it.
It's the ideology that will replace neoliberalism. Neoliberalism was a pathetic ideology that was necessary in order to liberate financial capital in the 1970s and 80s. And transhumanism is the ideology that the tech lords, I call them techno-feudal lords, are using in order to liberate completely and totally the form of capital which they possess, which I call cloud capital, what lives in your phone, that dialectical machine that interfaces directly with your mind. From their perspective, effectively they're all boys, aren't they? They're just silly little boys with toys, and they want to pretend that they have the capacity to defeat death, to defeat all our constraints. What they don't realize, of course, is the foolishness of this, because our constraints are constituent parts of our liberty. Without our constraints, if you allow us to do anything we want, then essentially we lose the capacity to reason, and we lose the capacity for poetry, for beauty, for appreciation. Thankfully, this is simply a nightmarish dream for them. We need to defeat them, because if we don't, and we allow them to rule the world with their cloud capital, with this amazing piece of machinery that they have invented, not invented, they didn't invent it, they are using it and they're owning it, then we are going to become effectively techno-serfs or cloud serfs in a great techno-feudalism in which they are the tech lords and they entertain these pathetic fantasies.
Yanis, you say they need to be defeated, but I'm yet to see any movement that has progress or evolution behind it, the momentum that it has, that's ever been defeated. In other words, slowing down progress, it's like holding back the tide.
Nobody said anything about slowing down progress. I'm all for progress.
No, but this is a form of progress from their point of view. I mean, who doesn't want to be able to think better than the next person, by being augmented?
But who said that thinking faster is thinking better?
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Tell Descartes that. Tell Einstein that. They would laugh in their face. These are, as I said, they're stupid boys with very expensive toys. And we need those toys, because those toys can be very useful to humanity. I'm all in favor of AI solving problems and designing antibiotics which we wouldn't have been able to design, antibiotics that help save lives in hospitals, right? I'm all for it. But the idea that it doesn't matter if the planet goes to the dogs, we will all migrate to Mars, or that we will live forever, and our brain is going to be placed in a what, and we are going to live forever. These are dangerous fantasies which constitute the opposite of progress. They constitute regression into the worst fantasies of the Middle Ages.
Yanis, I have to ask you again, because it's an interesting point. You say we need to fight against it, and it's probably a fight that I would actually consider joining if I thought there was a chance of winning. What's the strategy?
But Matthew, suppose this was the 1780s, and you and I were in London having a discussion about the onslaught of capitalism, which was just beginning then. There was no trade union movement, there was no democratic movement, there was no movement to decolonize. It all happened. And in the same way that the march of capital brought about the reaction to capital, which civilized the world, not fully, but to some extent, importantly, similarly, the march of cloud capital of these amazing technologies is going to give rise to the movements, and some of us are already working towards them, This is why I'm still in politics. This is why I'm part of something called DiEM25, the Democracy in Europe movement, the Progressive International. We're working very hard on all those things. We organize every year on Black Friday, we organize hashtag Make Amazon Pay, because we know that behind Amazon there is this cloud capital, and there is Mr. Bezos and all these techno-feudal lords who will drive us to extinction if we let them remain in control of the remarkable machinery that we need to put in the service of humanity.
That's a great phrase, techno-feudal lords. That's another one for me to look up. You've taken us neatly back to politics, Greek politics, which you're still in, as you say. But we're at an anniversary this year, aren't we? Come June, July. It's been 10 years, nearly to the day, that you resigned as Greece's finance minister. Just remind our viewers why you resigned.
Greece had become a debt colony. And the powers that be, the financiers, the Troika, the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the local oligarchy here in Greece, they wanted us to go deeper into that debt prison. And we were elected in order to get our people out of the debt prison. The only way to do that is not to take another loan, not to take another credit card when you can't repay your mortgage, right? And 62% of the people supported people like me to say no to this new loan that would have pushed us further into and deeper into the debt prison. And on that night, my prime minister and colleague and friend,
Alexis Tsipras,
he surrendered, and I wouldn't surrender with him. Ever since I've been on the opposite side of the aisle, I've been fighting together with many, many people. We were defeated. We had 10 years of being driven deeper into the debtor's prison. Now, if you're a financier in the city of London, in New York, wherever, you think that Greece is the best thing that has happened to you because, you come to Greece, you buy a distressed mortgage that has a face value of £100,000, you buy it for 5,000. If you auction off the house or the flat or the shop for 50,000, you've put 5,000 in, you got 50,000. So you have the financial circles around the world celebrating Greece as a great success story, but we are losing people. Let me give you a very simple statistic which everybody can understand. In the last few years, half of the doctors who graduated from our public medical schools, and we only have public medical schools, have left the country. A country that effectively gets rid of half of its doctors, young doctors, is not a sustainable country. So this is why I'm still in politics.
Well, I remember covering the story in 2016, and the agony of austerity for ordinary Greeks was very obvious. Lots of homelessness, people couldn't afford medicine, and so on and so on. It was awful. Can I ask one final question? Where is Greece now economically? How is it?
Well, if you're part of the 20%, the top 20% that lives off rents, not off production, but off rents, and you're connected to this process of essentially selling off and selling out every part of Greece, airports, ports, railways, roads, and these decline in terms of their technological prowess, but at the same time, the people who actually buy them, the funds, hedge funds that buy them, make zillions, incredible profit rates or rent rates. You're really very well off. But if you are part of the 80% of the population that needs to make a living out of a wage, then your living standards are falling precipitously every day.
And the solution out of this?
When you're digging a hole, you have to stop digging. It's really very simple. We need to break up all the cartels that are creating ridiculous profit margins for the oligarchs who own our electricity stations, the oligarchs who own the supermarkets. The gap between the prices you pay at the checkout and the cost of the supermarket is the highest in Europe, in a country which has the lowest wages, hourly wages, in terms of their purchasing capacity. So we need to just we just need to stop this. But
in terms of the debt, should Greece do something about the debt? And also, final question, the Eurozone, should they come out of the Euro?
Well, look, the Euro is a currency. Changing a currency is always very costly. My line was always, we need to do whatever we can to reform the economy in order for the 80% of the population to make a life out of their circumstances. If we can do it in the euro, we should do it in the euro. If we can't do it in the euro, we should get out of the euro. It's really very simple. The instrument should never be the goal. It should be the instrument for prosperity. The situation now is very dire. And you know what? What they did to us here in Greece 10 years ago is the reason why Germany is deindustrializing. I was telling Schäuble that, the finance minister of Germany at the time. I was saying that what you're doing to us, this austerity is going to come back and bite you. Because why is Donald Trump wiping the floor clean with the European Union? Because the European Union, through this austerity, which started in Greece, in order to go to Germany, has kept wages very low across Europe, demand very low, investment very low. And so, Mercedes and Siemens, the only way to sell is to sell the United States. And now this model is kaput. So Greece is a microcosm, the worst, if you want, the most fragile part of a collapsing building.
Yanis, we've run out of time for our studio, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you, and we hope to see you in June in Athens when we examine Greece 10 years on from the crisis. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, if you want to see any more of these episodes, go to our channel on YouTube, Nexus, TRT World. But until next week, goodbye. Yassos.